I remember seeing the trailer for the first upcoming Despicable Me movie and thinking, sounds interesting, a movie from the perspective of a villain who loves being evil? That could be a lot of fun. I mean, imagine watching a movie completely from the perspective of Jafar or Ursula, and it was about how much they enjoy being bad and not about how much they are really just tortured souls who were betrayed and the cruel world made them bad. Remember the classic bad guys who were bad just because they wanted to be and no other reason? Those guys are fun. So thinking the concept sounded good, I saw the movie with some friends and was kind of disappointed. It wasn't what I expected, it had tropes that I found really irritating.
Don't worry, I will catch you!
You gave us that!
You guys are literally about to die. Don't you think there's a better time for this? Like, what are you gonna do? Stay on the exploding ship? And in general, it was a lot more, unsubtle, shall we say, when it came to the humour. I realised this clearly wasn't for me and never watched it again, and to date I haven't seen any of the sequels or spin-offs. Funny thing is, when it came to the minions themselves, their entire presence never even clocked in my brain. Like, if I was gonna think about that movie, I'd remember Gru and the kids, that fluffy scene that was obvious meme material.
So fluffy, I'm gonna die!
How surprised I was that this scene became even bigger meme material.
I grab the moon, I sit on the toilet, what?
And how much I didn't like the villain at all. But the blatant and simplistic comic relief didn't particularly warrant my attention. It's almost as if I was trying not to pay any attention to them, in the same way I'd ignored the existence of some other very similar, small, loud, obnoxious blobs that would end up taking over a franchise. So it kind of blows my mind that even in the present day, these things are goddamn inescapable. But how did that happen? Because it makes sense that they'd be popular with children, but the weird thing is they've kind of become mainstream. Like, they're not just known to kids, they seem to be known to a lot of adults as well. And adults that probably haven't even seen the movies, but they know what the Minions are. Maybe the reason is in part because the Minions aren't particularly unique at all. Like, before Despicable Me, there are many different kinds of Minions, just under a different name with different designs. You see, I was doing some searching and trying to come up with a name for what exactly the Minions are, but not what they are in the film, like not what they're based on or what they're meant to represent. I mean as in what they are in terms of the trope they are, but not as in comic relief or anything relating specifically to their story. I mean as in what kind of character they are. I say character, big quotation marks. But instead, I just found no specific word to describe them, and I just found more examples of them, like way more than I had in my head. That just made me more determined to find a word that could be used to encompass all of these different types of characters. Why? Well, I like words, me. But also because, well, to be honest, the title of this video is a little bit misleading, because I don't actually care about the Minions from Despicable Me. But there's a lot of other media that I do like that have these kinds of characters, and in my opinion, more than one of them have been ruined by these types of characters, but not all of them, and I kind of want to find out why. So when I'm talking about the Minions, I don't mean the Minions, the characters. I'm much more interested in what the hell the Minions are as an archetype. What exactly are these? Like, look at them. They are all similar. There are traits we can clearly see that all of them share despite the fact they are completely different species. Shared traits include, they are small in stature and near to identical looking, with maybe a few of them having features that make them more distinguishable from the others. They are numerous. This in combination with their small stature makes it seem like there's almost an unlimited and uncountable amount of them. But despite the fact that there are many of them, they are similar to each other even in behaviour. Most of the time they aren't meant to be individualistic. They may share a specific language that only they understand, or use specific catchphrases or make specific noises to their species.
Well, it's a very smurfy flying ship, Astro Smurf.
Papoy? Akala na Papoy. No. Papoy.
And even if there are more individuals amongst them, they still appear to live in a collectivist-like group, staying amongst their own kind and dedicating their pursuits to the group as a whole. They are chaotic in nature, clearly having a perception of reality that is seen as different to all not within the group. There's an innocence about them. Even if they're meant to be the evil ones, there's something about their behaviour that implies their actions are the result of mischief and looking for fun, and a lack of understanding of any real harm that they may be causing. In this way, they seem to have a childlike mentality. Through these definable traits, you can see how all of these different groups of creatures are similar despite them coming from different media. This is why I found it kind of confusing as to why I couldn't find a nice clear word that could be used to describe all of these guys. Like, if I said, think of characters that fit the comedic henchman trope, I feel like everyone will be able to come up with some characters. Disney alone is a good source for a lot of them, and some of these minion-like characters even fall into that trope, but they don't all fit. Comedy definitely seems to be another important feature among these archetypes, but they are not all henchmen, and they're not all even bad guys. So with all this in mind and failing to find a word that encompasses all of them, I decided to just make one up of my own.
Making it up as we go along.
Though, if someone more knowledgeable can tell me there already is a word to describe all these guys, I'd very much like to know what it is. Or maybe you also made up your own, that would be interesting to hear. Doesn't matter to this video, of course, I've already made it, but knowing is nice too. I think the things that most defines these guys is their numerousness in their group, their similarity to each other, and the focus on humour and shenanigans that their behaviour together incurs. So I hereby dub these guys as the Chaos Collective. Anytime I search this phrase I get results related to D&D because, you know, chaos alignments. So I'm pretty sure I haven't stolen this from anyone. I feel it makes sense since it highlights the importance of the group, and also that the group typically causes chaos for themselves, but mainly for others that are not a part of their group. So knowing what a Chaos Collective is, how exactly do they ruin everything? Well, it's not that the archetype as a whole ruins everything, it's more that given certain circumstances, they definitely have the potential to do so. A friend of mine called Renkamu was actually the first to highlight the Smurfs as being part of this Chaos Collective archetype. Like, they weren't actually on my radar until she mentioned how they were also similar to some of the others I had in mind. Not only do they fit, but they may well be the earliest example of the archetype on TV media, having been created in 1958. The Smurfs have also succeeded in maintaining a long time period of fame and popularity. Even in the present day, appearing in a new rebooted film version, this fame echoes the danger that the Chaos Collective creates in franchises. It could be argued that the Smurfs were one of the first to show off the potential of this archetype. Are you responsible for this? How the Smurfs ruined everything. However, if we look at an example like the Smurfs or the Gremlins, the franchise itself revolves around them as the main characters, so they can't really ruin their own media, as the very basis of the story itself is dependent on them. Therefore, any shortcomings in these franchises would be a result of a poor concept, story, or execution. But what if we look at the collective as side characters, like the little green men in Toy Story? Surely those little guys aren't ruining Toy Story? Disney doesn't need help doing that! And I don't think they're ruining Toy Story, but I'd argue that the little green men very much have the potential, you know, in a scenario separate to how the constant sequels may be doing that anyway. Just to be clear, I don't dislike this archetype as a whole. I don't dislike the little green men. I used to have one. He made me a bit of money on eBay. I think these guys are fine. They're not my favourite characters, but they're not intrusive or annoying, and can be pretty funny. But they are somewhat popular. I mean, Toy Story is a popular movie, so it goes without saying that all the characters are already super marketable. You know, being toys already. It's actually kind of evil how smart this is. The little green men, considering their side characters are not part of the main cast, are pretty freaking popular in the merchandise department. And that's exactly where the danger is, because there's nothing better to a company than a simple, easy to replicate design that sells. Not just easy to make toys out of, but easy to insert over and over and over again into the franchise. It has a one-note personality. The great thing about that is you don't have to keep track of pesky things like character development. That gets you complaints as soon as you forget something later on down the line. These guys get to be the same, forever. The enjoyment comes from sticking these weirdos into different situations and seeing how their one-note personalities interact in these situations. This opens up the potential for storytelling that simply creates a stream of random scenarios with these personalities to interact with, where the scenarios don't have to be related in any way, where there are no consequences, and where past actions don't matter. Now, there's nothing wrong with this method of storytelling. It only really becomes a problem if the media started out as being about different characters with different motivations and personalities with their own conflicts. If it used to be about a fantastical world you're in and exploring that, suddenly all this gets overshadowed by these one-note personalities in different environments and events that aren't even connected to each other. Speaking of which, one-note characters is actually quite a fitting trope for the Chaos Collective, even though that's not generally the use for the trope. A one-note character is normally used to describe personalities like the 7 dwarfs from Snow White, or the emotions from Inside Out, or these Lego guys at the beginning of the Lego movie. There is a very specific thing that defines these characters' personalities. They are angry all the time, they're sneezy, or they love giant sausages.
Oh yeah, I sure do love giant sausages! Giant sausages!
When it comes to the Chaos Collective as characters, they either use the one-note trope exactly by having one or two individuals amongst the group who have these specific personalities making them distinguishable from the rest.
Where does it hurt, Ralphie?
Everywhere, and I hate everywhere. I hate
You will stay sick unless you cheer up.
I hate cheering up.
Or the one-note personality is shared by the group as a whole. This is how the little green men from Toy Story are. Despite this though, the little green men didn't take over Toy Story. Oh, they've stuck around both in merchandising and in the movies and games, but they didn't take over. They are fleeting comic relief that disappear, and what remains is a continued focus on the main characters, their motivations, their conflicts, and their adventure. A lot of stuff that you can't really have with these little guys. If Toy Story started dedicating more time to them, if instead of Toy Story 2 you got the Little Green Men the movie, if they were showing up constantly throughout the movie, I think they would start having a detrimental impact on the franchise because it's not supposed to be about them. They were not the reason anyone watches Toy Story. And that's how the Little Green Men could ruin Toy Story. I've noticed that even when it comes to the Minions from Despicable Me, there's some sentiment that the Minions actually ruined Despicable Me. That the first movie at least originally had a heart, about someone who was bad and selfish learning to become a better person and make a family. But this heart was crushed under the mindless, repeatable, and marketable mass that became a new focus. Despite the fact that I'm not a fan of this movie, I can appreciate the notion of being frustrated that something you liked was hijacked by a bunch of characters that weren't supposed to be important. Because it happened to me first. It happened to all Rayman fans. That's right, this is about the Rabbids. That's what it was all leading up to. It's a secret! This is really what this is all about. I wouldn't really care about any of this apart from the fact that anyone who knows enough about Rayman, who's felt the pain of waiting for Murphy to make good on his promise,
See you in Rayman 4!
had to stand there and watch as not only did the Rabbids appear, but they kept appearing. Over and over and over. To the point where they are in a freaking Mario game. But where is Rayman? He's sniffing coke off a hooker. And that's not even a joke! The Rabbids are pretty much the Proto-Minions. They're all identical looking, they scream, they are chaotic and incomprehensible. They make kiddies laugh. And I'm actually sad to admit that when I first saw the advertisements with them in, I found them pretty funny. I remember watching the ads on YouTube and they were all like, Rabbids can't do insert thing here, but they sure can dance! And then it was just Rayman surrounded by Rabbids dancing, and then there was that one that subverted the whole thing by being like, Rabbids can't do insert thing here, but they sure can fly! And then it just showed a Rabbid like jumping off a high building and splatting on the floor, and it was like, did you really believe that? And that's not the exact phrasing, by the way, that's just what I remember off the top of my head. It'd be interesting actually to look up those ads and see how close my recreation from memory is, because it's been years since I've seen those ads. But I found that one particularly hysterical. And then I saw the actual game, and I didn't buy it. But I thought that it was just a spin-off, you know, like a lot of games had previously done kind of party mode spin-offs from the main series, like Mario. So I thought at some point Rayman 4 would be coming with a completely new 3D adventure. We just have to wait a little longer, right? Right? And now, announcing the amazing, mystical, disappearing bag that is totally not the result of a different recording session. and they clearly knew what they were doing. They knew that those guys were going to take over, because it should have been a red flag that the advertisements for Rayman Raving Rabbids was all about how kooky and crazy the Rabbids are, with hardly any mention of, you know, Rayman, the name of the franchise. Having said that, Rayman has always had a really weird advertisement strategy. I mean, we have such hits as, get it? He's got a huge dick! And if you look at the Rayman releases since Raving Rabbids, it is depressing. I mean, just look at these mainline releases. You have the original game released in 1995. 4 years after that, you get Rayman leaps into 3D with Rayman 2: The Great Escape. I myself got the updated remake of this on the PS2 titled Rayman Revolution, which released in the year 2000. Then another 4 years after that came Rayman 3: Hoodlum's Havoc in 2003. So we can clearly see each Rayman game has a general development time of 3 to 4 years, and each release came with ports to almost every available platform: PC, Game Boy Advance, DS, etc. So with that in mind, when did the next mainline release of Rayman come? 2011. Doesn't that seem quite a long time after 2003? I mean, I've already spoiled it for a while now, but guess what appeared in the time slot that would have normally been the new mainline Rayman release? And then what came after that? Raving Rabbids 2, a mere 1 year after the first. A suspiciously fast development time, and a year after that, and after that, and after that, you get the idea. The takeover is officially complete, till we finally get an actual Rayman game in 2011. And don't get me wrong, I really enjoy Origins and Legends. They're callbacks to the original 2D games, and they are tons of fun, but they're not Rayman 4, the 3D voice-acted platformer collectathon. What happened to Rayman 4? Well, it started out as a separate project running concurrently to Raving Rabbids, although confusingly it seems both projects were named Raving Rabbids, most likely because the Rabbids were originally made to be the main villains of the game, which they still became, but they were meant to be more along the lines of the previous Rayman villains, like the robot pirates or the Hoodlums. You know, an actual threat and even scary in some of these shots. The Rabbids we know released on the Wii and was successful. It seems Ubisoft were trying to create a sequel to Rayman 3, but also trying to appease Nintendo by creating a game that would incorporate motion controls, because that's what the Wii is all about. Raving Rabbids on the Wii met those criteria, and since it was basically a series of mini-games, it required far less development time than the 3D beat-em-up with multiple powers, which is what Rayman 4 was going to be based on what we can see from the leaked prototype. And just look at the concept art of the potential levels and mechanics of what was going to be Rayman 4. It definitely feels like a follow-on from the direction that Rayman 2 and 3 took, with these kinds of dark, fantastical environments. It also seems that Rayman was going to have a power-up system similar to Rayman 3's cans, that would give him abilities and completely change his appearance. There was also going to be the ability to ride different mounts, including a giant spider, hawk, and other vehicles. And look, I know for a fact that there are plenty of people that enjoy the Raving Rabbid games we got in the end, but I can't help myself. I feel sad when I look at this stuff and think, I could have been playing a game where I control Rayman riding a giant spider crawling on the ceiling, and instead we got this.
Oh my god, it's so gross!
How can that not just dig the deepest, darkest pit into the bottomless void that is my stomach? Ultimately, Rayman 4 ended up being cancelled as the new focus transferred to making Rabbid games, the first releases of which were just a series of mini-games, with the kind of generic mechanics that you expect motion controls to make use of in small, unexpanded environments. Gone was the 3D platformer adventure with multiple different enemy types, different characters in general, and different long interactable levels. You can see how they could make more money from the Rabbids. They are literally the main resource in the game, the same 3D model with the same voice lines pasted over and over again, with Rayman practically being the only other character in these games. I mean, there are baby glow boxes in the beginning of the first Raving Rabbids, but good god, look at them! You can tell these guys were not important at all in the game, like geez. I think you would have been better off ripping out the Rayman 2 baby glow box model. They thought so little of these guys that the ending of the game is Rayman escaping and realizing that he forgot to save the baby glow boxes. The game can't even pretend they care about anything other than the Rabbids. The minions are the Rabbids, but even more successful. The Minions became so successful that the word minion has been replaced, its original meaning lost, and just the mention of the word instantly brings these guys to the forefront of the conversation, even if it's between fully grown adults. There are many people in the world today who have never heard of a Rabbid, and even a not insignificant amount of people who will have played the Mario game with Rabbids, having no idea that the Rabbids originated from Rayman. This can't be said of the Minions. You'd be hard pressed not to find someone that doesn't know what a minion is. I miss the days when the first thing that would come to my head when I heard the word minion was that unassuming bad guy from Spy Kids that gets turned into a four-headed, six-handed Foogly. And by Spy Kids 2 we find out that they just left him like that despite having the power to turn him back. Yeah, those were the days. But despite the difference of success, they are both successful in their own right, and they've both resulted in the same thing. Rabbids broke away from Rayman and became a franchise of its own. I would say that Rayman Raving Rabbids 2 was an early warning sign that things were headed this way, as the game did away completely with the fantasy setting and instead has the Rabbids and Rayman himself in the real world, with no explanation of how this happened, because again, an explanation is completely pointless. It's the scenario of putting the crazy Rabbids in the real world environments and how their chaos interacts with it that matters, not anything related to Rayman. I'm not saying that Rayman characters or storylines were ever the most complex things, but especially in the 3D Raymans, exploration of this fantasy world was always a big thing. Even the games with limited graphics felt like they were transporting you to some faraway place, a different world that runs on its own logic. Which makes sense because of what Rayman lore we do get. The Rayman world is one that was dreamed up by Polycus, who is said to be the spirit of the world. Evil in the Rayman world comes from Polycus's nightmares. I don't know, maybe I'm just easily pleased, but that's a pretty interesting origin for a fantasy world if you ask me. I find that far more interesting than the real world gets invaded by aliens, pretty much. Haven't seen that story before, in multiple different ways. Why do the Minions ruin everything? I think the way I look at it, depending on how a piece of media handles its Chaos Collective, dictates whether they will ruin said media or not. If the collective is the focus of the media from the start, then there isn't really anything to ruin, as the focus is inherently on the shenanigans that the collective causes. If the collective are side characters to a greater story, this is where the danger is, because their potential and success relies on causing the other characters and storylines to fade into the background and become unneeded. They simplify the media down. Multiple voices become unnecessary, multiple 3D models and animations become unnecessary, progressive gameplay becomes unnecessary, progressive storylines becomes unnecessary. Remember before when I mentioned that with these guys you could just have random events in a sequence? I remember watching a video called How the Minions Are Changing Animation by Nerdstalgic, and one of the things it mentions is apparently the progress to make movies like the Minions is to create a series of uncorrelated events and play them one after the other. If we look at the origin of the Raving Rabbids games, we can see that this has been done but in game form, a series of unrelated mini-games. Obviously that isn't the case anymore. The Rabbids did get an actual fully continuous 3D game of their own, and hey, the Mario and Rabbid games actually ended up bringing Rayman back with his own campaign, so that's pretty nice. You haven't forgotten your roots.
It's so beautiful.
In any case, it's expected that multiplayer party games are designed for friends to just pick up and start playing from the get-go, so of course you don't expect them to be a continuous storyline. The problem isn't that these games exist, it's that they completely replaced what looked like an incredible and imaginative continuation of Rayman 3, and for a long time they completely replaced Rayman himself. And that's how the Rabbids ruined Rayman. Until they brought him back again, but I don't think the damage is fully undone until we get a Rayman 4, damn it! Wait a minute. Does that say banana shampoo on that sign? Also, those signs are written in different languages. There's English, but there's also Spanish and French.
Pierre does the director, does the voice of all of the Minions, and it's a mixture of French and Spanish and Portuguese and Russian and this and that.
Wait a minute. The bad guy from Despicable Me is beating up a rabbit in a Nintendo Wii game. Pretend that that's a tinfoil hat. I was gonna make myself a tinfoil hat, and then I decided I couldn't be bothered and it'd be a waste of tinfoil. Did someone at Illumination see the Rabbids and just copy them and change their design? Because that seems way too coincidental. And this was meant to be a silly, like, haha, they're so similar. But, you know, it's not really that they're actually the same thing, it's just that they're similar. It wasn't supposed to be a real conspiracy theory, is what I'm saying. But after I saw the frigging Wii remote thing, I was like, that seems like Illumination throwing shade. They're beating up a rabbit. Well, a rabbit. In a Nintendo Wii game. That seems really sus to me. And that's it, that's the end, yay! I managed to keep it gaming relevant by diverting from talking about Minions to Rayman. I'm very proud of that. But to be fair, like, the Minions and the Rabbids, like, I feel like anyone can see that there's a very clear correlation between those two, so how could I not mention that? But regardless, if you like this more analysis-based content, you can check out my Everything Wrong with the Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series video. I'm quite proud of that one. It's just as it says, it's a comparison of the remake Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series with the original Klonoa Daughter Phantomile, the original Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil, and the original remake on Klonoa Wii. Yeah, that one's very good. It's probably the one that I like the most so far of these types of videos. Because it's about the thing that I love. And as well as that, this is what I was talking about, my diversion to film media. I also randomly did an analysis of Chicken Run Dawn of the Nugget, comparing it to the original Chicken Run film. That ended up happening because the first Chicken Run film is it's such a prominent film in my childhood. And then, 20 years later, it suddenly got a sequel, and then seeing that, I was like, you know, I wasn't expecting that to be as good as the original, to be fair. But it's not just not as good, it's like, they've changed things in ways that I really do not like. So yeah, I ended up just vomiting out a random Chicken Run film comparison. But yeah, there's also that one. To watch if you like this analysis style content. I'm trying to make more of these, it's just that obviously they take a lot longer, it takes more time to kind of get all of the thoughts onto a page and then just making it all. But I'm hoping to try and improve more the kind of quality of making these as I go along. And to fill the time in between, I've also got all of my other gameplay content. My latest playthrough was Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch, and it was 100% run, and it was the first time I'd ever actually finished that game. And I think that one is pretty good. It's also quite helpful because that frigging game is absolutely ridiculous for trying to get 100%, so watch the suffering before you attempt, basically. And as well as that, I've also been going through the mainline Ratchet & Clank games. I've done the first two, and next in line at some point is going to be the third of the mainline of the first three Ratchet & Clank games, so if you like Ratchet & Clank, stick around for that. And as well as that, I also have a bunch of gaming content with my friends, and the highlight reels are really good because they're just the chaos and the silliness that happens when playing in that group, so, you know, if you just want to see something quick, those videos are quite good to watch. They're pretty funny. But yeah, that's about it. That's all I have to say. This is the end! Thank you so much for watching and making it to the end. Bye. Rayman's in Astrobot, and that means apparently he's getting a new release? I keep hearing about this potential new remake, or maybe even a new Rayman game, or, you know, could it be Rayman 4? There's been leaks, apparently. I mean, I don't know. All these Rayman video creators are driving me crazy. I just want some official news from Ubisoft. You can tell the Rayman desperation is real by the amount of, if Rayman's coming, guys, believe us videos that are, flying around nowadays. Whoops, I hope I didn't break that. I've got a cold now as well, which has just come on after everything was supposed to be done, so this is a perfect time to have a croaky throat when I'm trying to do an announcer voice.